Christy J with Stitch in Heaven, and welcome back to Schoolhouse Dash. This week we're actually going to do the birds in the air. So you worked with half square triangles last week, so now we're going to take it one step further. We're going to do kind of a hybrid block. We're going to do, half of it is going to be your bright colors or your blues if you have the kit, and then half of it's going to be your background. So this one kind of meshes the two. Super easy blocks. You're going to do 8 of these because they are going to be the corners of our Churndash, our secondary design. So just make sure you just post your homework, post your blocks, because we love seeing them. Post them in the Facebook group. And if you'll do a hashtag Schoolhouse Dash with it, then Anita and I will get the alerts that you've actually posted, and we will look through those. And then we do just a random drawing, and we're giving away prizes every single week, compliments of Island Batik. So we're so glad you're joining us, and without further ado, birds in the air with Mitzi Red.
Okay, now we're ready to go with a new block. There's a total of 8 of these in the whole quilt. So this one you're going to be making 8 times, but don't worry. Again, it's a very easy process to go through. We're going to work with some half square triangles and then putting it all together to make a beautiful block. Now this one is going to be birds in the air. And so if you look on the quilt, this is going to help to add in where you bring in your log cabin and those to make the corners of that Churndash for the whole Schoolhouse Dash quilt. For your Island Batik fabrics you're going to use on this one, we are going with Waterfall, Scuba, and Parchment. So beautiful colors. We are making the half square triangles again are going to go together. We're going to fill them in, super easy to do, and then you're finishing off with a larger piece of that parchment, because that parchment is going to help to give that lighter area that makes those corner points of your Churndash that goes in your center. Okay, so again, easy to do, don't get too worried. Now your triangles are a big cut. You're making some pretty large squares with these, but then you're just cutting them on the diagonal. So this goes pretty easy to do. You've also, in your scuba, you've got 3 smaller triangles, and then you've got also your larger squares, or medium-sized squares, I guess, when you look at the size of that parchment, in your scuba and in the, oh, let's see, what's the other one? Waterfall. Yeah, waterfall. So what I'm going to do again, I'm going to draw my diagonal line on those because we're making the half square triangles again, just like we do with any of them. So you can pick which other fabric to go with. I'm going to go with my lighter on my scuba. Or I'm sorry, waterfall. I'm going to go with waterfall. And I'm going to line myself up. All these colors go so nicely together. And draw my diagonal lines. Now I'm using just my Sew Line pencil or pen. This is the this is the air erasing one. So I'm going to use my air erasing. And I'm using one of my Creative Grid rulers. This one's big enough to go across all the way on my diagonal. So I'm going to use that one. And I'm just going to go ahead and draw these off. Now, all in all, when it comes down to it, you're going to need a couple of pieces for that. So with this, it's going to give me actually 4 of the half square triangles, and then the rest of them, of course, are going to go to the other 8 blocks that you're going to need, because on this one, we're only going to need actually 1, 2, and 3 to go with. So let me go ahead, and again, we're going to just lay that fabric right on top of, we're going to put the waterfall on top of the scuba, because it's right here in my lines. And I'll go ahead and do this one as well. So it's ready to go. So I can just feed these into my machine, one right behind the other. You're going to stitch a 1/4 inch away from that diagonal line. So using your 1/4 inch foot for your machine, just go ahead and stitch one side. I'm going to feed my second one in. Real easy to do right behind it. And this just helps to kind of speed up the process. I find the more I can prep ahead of time, the faster I'm able to go through and stitch. So that's what I'm doing here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and cut. I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to do the other side because you're going to stitch a 1/4 inch on each side of that diagonal line, because we're going to cut this then in half down that diagonal line to give us the 2 half square triangles. So super easy to do. And you know, when you're doing this for yourself, you can start a really long line of this going through, and it does make it a lot quicker to get through them, because like I said, you are going to be making 8 total blocks with this. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take my scissors. Again, you can use scissors, you can use a rotary cutter, whichever you prefer. And I am just cutting down that drawn diagonal line. And that's gonna be within my seam allowance. So I'm gonna go ahead and press these. Okay. And I'm gonna press these towards the scuba. That is my darker color. So that's the one I'm gonna go towards. Just put a little heat in there to go ahead and set those threads in that seam. Now, again, I'll put a little bit of steam into it. Feel free if you want to. If you don't, that's totally fine. Now, I'm only gonna need 3, even though that made 4 because I was using 2 sets of squares. I'm only gonna need 3 per block. So you're gonna end up making 24 total of these to do the whole 8 blocks that go with it. Okay, so let me go ahead and do this last one. Press out. I've got really good heat coming from my iron and also coming back from my press air board. Okay. Now what I'm going to do next, as you've seen me do plenty of times before, is I'm going to grab my scissors. I'm going to trim off these little corner pieces that are here. We don't need those. They're just going to add bulk in. So just go ahead and trim those away and toss those little dog-ear pieces in the trash. Because the more we can reduce the bulk in our seams, the better off we are. Okay, last one. And done. Okay. Take those pieces, just go ahead and throw those out. And I'm going to bring out my big board. Now you've seen me use this in the other videos. This is the Martelli, the quilter's mat, and of course it's got the pressing pad underneath it. Because I've found that it's really a lot easier, especially with these bigger ones, to lay them out. I can make sure I've got everything lined up properly, and it gives me the opportunity to really view it before I start stitching it together. Trust me, it saved me before from making some errors. Now your directions are in your book as well, or in your pattern that you get, but you want to go ahead and lay out. I'm going to first lay out my big piece here. Now this is my parchment, and so that was that larger square that we go ahead and cut down the diagonal. And then I have the 3 half square triangles, and I have 3 individual in the scuba also. And those are going to be used to offset here down in our lower areas. So let's go ahead and take a look at lining that up, and I'm going to just reference back in my book because it's going to make it easier to make sure I've got everything right in place. Now the first thing I like to do when I'm kind of showcasing and lining this up is to go ahead and I'm going to take my 3 individual scuba triangles, and yes, they're going to look, you know, larger, but that's okay, not a problem. I'm going to take my smaller ones. I'm going to go ahead and put them in. These are my half square triangles. So I say they're smaller because the triangle's smaller, it looks like. But these are my half square triangles. I'm going to lay those in. Again, the lighter color is coming in towards, and then my last piece is going to be up in that corner. So what you can see here is we start to put that together. Obviously, my triangles look a lot larger than what my parchment is, but remember, as we're bringing that together, we're going to start to lower that down. So how does this all come together? Because you see it's kind of sitting on a diagonal. It's actually pretty easy. So the first I'm going to take is I'm going to take my middle piece on that top row, and I'm going to take one of my triangle that's there beside it. I want to make it even right here across this corner, okay, so around the square. So it's going to leave me, I'll show you this from the back side, and you can see it from the front. The points are going to be sitting over just a little bit, and that is okay. So the key is making sure that it's just lined up really nice and even there. And I'm going to do that real quick, and then I'm going to put it through with just go ahead and again that 1/4 inch seam. And I'm going to take it straight down, and I'll go ahead and stitch off that point because that's okay. Next up, I have my next half square triangles. I'm going to go ahead and put those together. Set that in place as well. And again, stitch right down that seam area. Using that 1/4 inch seam, and try and be sure we stay as consistent as possible with it, because it really does make a difference when you're putting all these small pieces together. Okay, now obviously I'm not pressed yet, but that gives that first row. So I'm just going to go ahead and set that up there. So if you think about it more in rows than on the diagonal, it's a little less, it's a lot less intimidating actually. So just like I did the first one, I'm going to go ahead and do the second. But this time I've only got the one triangle and the one set of half square triangles. Okay, that one is done. Now the last thing I've got is I've got this one lonely triangle, right? And from here, I'm gonna go ahead and press everything first because I wanna make sure I'm nice and clean before I start putting those together. Plus, we're gonna wanna get rid of some of those points. So I'm gonna press all one direction for the first row and then the opposite direction for the second row. And the reason I'm doing that is just so I can make sure I'm nesting my seams up really nice and clean, is what I'm going for. So I'm just going to give it a little bit of press there and some heat behind it. And then I'm going to go ahead and give a little bit of burst of steam in here. So it's the noise you're hearing, just that steam coming through. Knowing my Larstar iron, it's probably going to talk to me in a second to let me know that, hey, I've got to reheat. You took some heat out of me. So these are all pressing towards the triangle. And so since I want to go ahead and be able to nest that seam up, I'm going to press this towards my square now. Okay. And again, it's just going the opposite direction so that when I put them together, they just lay up so nicely. See, there's my iron telling me needs some more heat. But it does really nice. You have to get used to that sound. First time I ever heard it, not gonna lie, I jumped. Didn't know what was coming at me. All right, now I do have some of my corner little dog ear pieces. I'm just gonna trim those down. I don't need those. And again, it just adds bulk, so I'm just gonna give them a quick little trim. Doesn't matter, they're going away anyway. So now I'm gonna take what would be that first and the second row, and I'm gonna put those up there together. I'm gonna attach that. I'm gonna make sure my seams are matching up really nicely. And this is, you know, where I go ahead and put a pin in there to make sure everything is holding good and secure. Now you're gonna have a little bit of that point coming off, and that's okay. It's basically a 1/4 inch. So it's gonna be perfectly fine because that'll get trimmed away anyway. I'm gonna lay this together. You can go ahead and put that 1/4 inch seam in there. I'm gonna slow my machine down. I'm gonna take my pin out, and I can use my pin just to kind of hold those, all that bulk of those seams together as I let my machine go ahead and feed that through. Just wanna make sure I'm good and aligned all the way, rest of the way down. Feed it all in. Perfect. Now, because like I said, I do like to press as I go, I'm gonna go ahead and give that a little bit of press. We'll go ahead and straighten that out before I add that final triangle in there. And this is always nice because you can start to see these points all come together, and I love seeing how that lays out. Now you do have a bit of a bulk of a seam right where that's coming all together. So like I said, for myself, I give it a little bit of steam and a good firm press on there to go ahead and get those to lay down as much as I can. Because when it comes later that I'm quilting it, or if you're sending it off to a long armor, whether you do it yourself or not, you really want to make sure that that bulk of those seams are as flat as possible. I'm gonna go ahead and take off that little bit of a dog ear there. Don't need that on. So give it a little bit of a trim. And then I'll show you where we're lined up now so you can get an idea of how it's coming together. So the last pieces I've got to come in with then is to put this little triangle piece on and then put my big one. So I'm gonna go ahead and let me do the triangle next. Again, I'm gonna line up with my straights as much as I can. Which they should, you know, if you did a really good job on your cutting, they should line up perfectly on there for you. Because it's such a small piece, I'm not going to pin that one. And I'm just going to go ahead and put that 1/4 inch seam right in there. Just feed it through. Perfect. Okay. Give that a press because we obviously want that to go ahead and lay back and into place. I'm going to give a little bit of pressure on there to make sure it lays nice and flat for me. Okay. Trim off that little excess dog ear because for a couple of reasons now, especially when we're working on this long line, it's going to attach up to that parchment. So the last thing I want is when that's off, although we don't want to see any of those coming through. So now I've got my matching piece to my parchment, okay? So I'm just gonna fold that over. Now because this is a longer line I'm working with, I'm gonna go ahead and pin that one. I just wanna make sure everything stays really good and in place. So the first things I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start on my corners. Now this is just how I like to pin. So I'm gonna start in my corner. I'm gonna go to my other corner, grab a couple pins here, and I'm gonna put a pin in my other corner. And here's the trick. If for any reason you made a little bit of a mistake and you stretch your fabric, if you pin your corners first and pin in your center then, what you can do is you can kind of ease that excess fabric in. Now, that shouldn't have happened, but it happens. It does to the best of us. And if it does, this way you can kind of ease that fabric in, and so it's a little bit more even throughout, so you don't end up with a bunch of bulk or, you know, where it's, you've got almost what looks like a small gather in there. So I've got this all pinned together, ready to go, and literally the only thing left to do is to take that all the way down from one tip to the other. I'm obviously going to slow down as I get to my pins if I need to, and go ahead and pull that pin out. You do not want to run over your pins. And as you get to the areas that has more bulk to it, where all those seams are matching up, take your time going over them, let your machine feed them through. I've personally found that I like doing the solid piece on the bottom, and then I have my bulk of my seams up here on top. And the reason for that is because as I am feeding this through, I know I'm staying flat on the bottom. I've got that single piece of fabric. But on the top, if for any reason some of my seams are gonna try to lay over, I can use, you know, just literally one of my pins here, and I can just go ahead and flatten that out and make sure it feeds through very nice and even. All right, so that is done. Now, we've talked, you know, a lot of times as far as, you know, ironing and doing your pressing to your dark side versus your light side. But I'm gonna kind of give you an idea and something to think about here. So if I go to my dark side here, and it's easy to do, but I've got a little bit more bulk that I'm fighting against. Whereas if I actually do press to my lighter side, nobody panic, it's okay. I have less bulk and seams there. So I actually have chosen in my quilt to press to my lighter side. Now this is also the advantage of taking out those little dog ear points, because otherwise they would be poking through and I'd be seeing that on my parchment. So I'm just gonna go ahead and give it a little press here. I need to press my parchment too. I pre-cut everything from the beginning, and then it folds into individual bags for my pieces. So it gets a little wrinkle, but that can easily be just pressed right out of there. Okay. The last thing I'm gonna do on this is I'm gonna go ahead and trim off those extra little dog ears that are on my corners. And then just wait to see how beautiful those Island Batik and those blues lay up against this parchment. You know, we've got, coming in here, I've got the waterfall, we've got the scuba putting up against the parchment. To put it on here so it takes it away from that yellow background that's my pressing pad. But look at that, great points all the way through. We're gonna see them, we've still got plenty of space here for our 1/4 inch seams, and it's done. So you've got birds in the air done. You have 8 total to make. They're gonna come in and be right here in your corners on that center churn dash. And so when you've got 8 of these, that's 8 more blocks already done. So we've got just a few more blocks left to go. So we'll see you soon with the next one.